Spring, 146 BC. On a hill above a burning city, the most powerful man in the Mediterranean is weeping. His name is Scipio Aemilianus. The city below him is Carthage, and it is dying on his orders. The fires will burn for days on end. Of a city of hundreds of thousands, ancient sources claim 50,000 walked out alive into slavery. Rome's greatest rival simply stopped existing. And as he watched it burn, Scipio turned to the historian standing beside him, a Greek named Polybius, who wrote it all down, and quoted a line of Homer about the fall of Troy. Then he explained why. One day, he said, "This will happen to Rome." Here is the part they don't tell you. Almost everything we know about Carthage, every story, every villain, every scandal, was written by the people who destroyed it. Not one Carthaginian book survives in the original. For 2,000 years, this city existed only as its enemies described it, until the earth started talking. Welcome to Zenith Dust, where we trace how empires rise and what they leave behind. If that sounds like your kind of journey, take a second to subscribe and like. Now, back to the water. Tradition tells it like this. In 814 BC, a queen fled the Phoenician city of Tyre, her husband murdered by her own brother the king. Her name was Alyssa. The Romans would call her Dido. She sailed west with a fleet and the royal gold, and on a hill above a wide African bay, she founded a settlement. They called it simply Carthage, New City. That's the legend, first written down centuries later by a Greek historian. But here's the thing. When archaeologists ran radiocarbon dates on the oldest finds beneath Carthage, they landed in the late 9th century BC, almost exactly where the legend put it. The Phoenicians were the great sea traders of the ancient world, and their new city sat at its perfect crossroads, the narrow waist of the Mediterranean, where every cargo of Spanish silver, British tin, and African gold had to pass. Within a few centuries, Carthage wasn't a colony anymore. It was the capital of a trading empire, a web of ports and treaties stretching from Africa to Sicily to the Atlantic. How far did they sail? Around 500 BC, a Carthaginian named Hanno led a fleet. 60 ships, the account claims, out past the Pillars of Heracles and down the coast of West Africa, further south than any Mediterranean sailor would follow for 2,000 years. When he came home, he hung the record of his voyage in a temple. A Greek translation survives. The original, like everything else, is gone. And this is the Carthage nobody remembers, not just sailors, farmers. A Carthaginian named Mago wrote 28 books on agriculture, irrigation, orchards, beekeeping, the management of estates, the most advanced farming manual of the ancient world. Remember those books. They matter later. If you want to understand what Carthage was at its height, look at its harbor. From the sea, you'd enter a rectangular merchant port. Masts, cranes, warehouses, the noise of 50 languages. But behind it, through a single guarded channel, the water opened into a perfect circle, the military harbor. Around its rim, and on the island at its center, covered slipways stood side by side, like teeth on a gear. Berths, by ancient account, for 220 warships. From a tower on that island, the admiral could see every ship in the fleet and every sail on the horizon. This was one of the largest, richest cities of the Mediterranean, and for a rising power across the water, that was exactly the problem. Rome and Carthage fought 3 wars over more than a century. In the second, Carthage produced the man who became Rome's living nightmare, Hannibal, who marched an army, elephants and all, over the Alps, and for 15 years could not be driven from Italy. Rome never forgot the fear. Even after Hannibal was defeated, even after Carthage was stripped of its fleet and its empire, the fear remained. In the Senate, an old man named Cato ended every speech on any subject with the same 4 words: Carthago Delenda Est. Carthage must be destroyed. In 149 BC, Rome found its pretext. The siege lasted 3 years. When the walls finally broke, the fighting went street by street, house by house, toward the hill at the city's heart. Then came the fires, burning for days on end, pulling the city down block by block. The survivors, ancient sources claim 50,000, were sold into slavery. The rest of a great city's population was simply gone. Rome then did something rarer than conquest. It erased. The city was leveled. The territory became forbidden ground, and Carthage's libraries, the accumulated knowledge of 6 centuries of exploration, trade, and science, were handed away to local kings, scattered and lost. Punic literature as a body of writing ceased to exist, with exactly one exception. By decree of the Roman Senate, one Carthaginian work, and only one, was translated into Latin: Mago's 28 books on farming. Rome burned the city, gave away its history, and kept the manual. Everything Carthage had learned about making land feed people now had a Latin name on it. And the famous ending you've probably heard, that Rome plowed the ruins and sowed the earth with salt so nothing would ever grow again? It never happened. No ancient writer mentions it, not one. The salt story appears in a scholar's essay in 1905, 20 centuries after the fire, and spread from textbook to textbook until it became fact. In 1986, a historian finally traced it to its source and dismantled it. Even the destruction of Carthage, it turns out, was rewritten by later hands. The victors wrote the history. Then other people rewrote the victors. Here is the irony Rome never saw coming. A century after the fire, Rome went back and rebuilt Carthage. Same bay, same hill, same perfect crossroads. The logic of the place outlived the curse on it. Augustus refounded it as a Roman colony, and within 100 years, Carthage was the second largest city of the Western Empire, the capital of Rome's African breadbasket, feeding the very city that had burned it. On fields worked, in no small part, by the wisdom in Mago's books. The city Rome erased became one of the brightest jewels of Rome. But the deeper story had to wait for the archaeologists. In the 1970s, an international rescue project began digging beneath the Roman layers, and the silent city started to answer. foundations of the circular war harbor, exactly where the ancient descriptions put it. The old Punic quarter on the Bursa hill, and down the coast, a small town called Kirkuan that Rome never rebuilt. The only Punic city left untouched, streets and bathtubs and doorsteps intact. Not every answer is comfortable. The site's most contested ground is the Tophet, a sanctuary of urns holding the cremated remains of infants. Whether they were sacrifices, as Roman and Greek writers insisted, or a cemetery for children lost too young, scientists studying the same bones still disagree. Even here, especially here, we have to read past the victor's pen. Elissa's hill still looks over the bay. The circular harbor is still there, a quiet lagoon now, its shape unmistakable from the air. Scipio wept because he understood. No zenith is permanent. But Carthage teaches the second half of that lesson. Rome could burn the books, and for 2,000 years the story belonged to the winners. And yet the harbor kept its shape. The seeds kept their wisdom. The earth kept the receipts. History is written by the victors until the earth writes back. This has been Zenith and Dust. If this story was worth your time, a like tells us, and a subscribe means you'll be standing with us when the next empire rises. See you at the next summit.